morning. I'm here with Professor Bilal al-Orfali, who is Associate Professor of Arabic Studies and also the Chair of the Department of Arabic Studies and Near Eastern Languages at the American University of Beirut. He's a well-known, very well-known specialist in several different areas of investigation, including Arabic literature, Quranic studies, and Sufi literature as well. And amongst his many books, he has over 20 of them. We can cite some of them. I don't want to embarrass him, but I'm going to have to mention a few of them. He has published editions and also studies of a number of texts. Some of them include a book called The Comfort of the Mystics, also a festschrift for one of his famous teachers, Ramzi al-Baki, called In the Shadow of Arabic, and then his own recent monograph called The Anthologist Art. So thank you very much, Professor Orfali, for
Mohammed,
being with us. If I can just kind of open up the floor here and ask you a general question to begin things. Can you tell us something about the work that you've been doing with the Library of Arabic Literature? Maybe just comment on some of the texts that you've been working on and some of your experiences as well.
Sure. I just finished translating a book called al-Hawamil wal-shawamil. The Philosopher Responds, right?
That's a good title.
In which Tawhidi asks, Abu Hayyan Tawhidi asks certain questions, and Miskawayh, the philosopher, responds to Tawhidi. Tawhidi was a literature and a philosopher. So I edited the text with Maurice Pomerantz, and Sophia Vassallo and James Montgomery translated it into English. Currently, I'm working with Maurice Pomerantz and Ramzi al-Baki on a very interesting book called Uqala, al-majanin, the wise madmen, or the wise fools, if you want. So we're editing and translating it into English, and I'm also working, and this has been going on for a while now, on a book, but also a monograph, but also an edition and a translation, perhaps also a literary commentary on Maqamat Badi' al-Zaman al-Hamadani, also a project with Maurice Pomerantz.
Now I had one question about this Uqala al-majanin, just in terms of translating the title, because it just occurred to me that it might be we pick up this book in English, and the title might be something like "Wise Fools" or "Intelligent Idiots" or whatever. Well, how would you translate that? And because that would be a very, however you slice it, it would be a very appealing title. I just like to know how you.
I think the wise fools work well because it has parallels also in the Byzantine tradition and also the modern Christian tradition. It's a common belief actually in many religious traditions that these fools have something that is spiritual in them.
Yeah, right? what they call the fool of God in
exactly. Exactly. So it has parallel with other traditions as well. So I would go with the wise fools or the wise madmen.
That's wise madmen's good too. Because I think that a title like that would be so attractive to anyone who's interested in world literature or and the resonances would also be clear to students of literature. And can you tell us about the architecture of the book and just give us a window into what kind of things we can expect to find in it when it comes out?
The title is very poetic, right? Uqala al-majanin. And these are mad men and women in the eyes of the society, in the eyes of people. But to the author, Abu al-Qasim al-Nisaburi, they are wise men and women. He was a Karami, right? He was a Karami from Nishapur, and Nishapur at the time was a hub for Sufism. But he was not a Sufi, and that's interesting. So you might find the same names in contemporary works, such as the works of Sulami, but with a different twist, with a different focus.
Oh, that's so interesting,
right? He is not a Sufi, so he looks at them as wise people. The prototype here is Buhlul, Buhlul al-Majnun, who probably occupies the biggest chapter in the book. Buhlul was a madman in Baghdad at the time of Harun al-Rashid. He was famous for criticizing the ruling class, including the caliph himself. And imagine someone criticizes Harun in public,
yes.
right, harshly, about all sorts of things. About his material concerns, about his decisions, about his attitude, his clothes, everything. And of course, he can get away with it because he's a majnoon,
yes,
right?
Yes.
He's a madman. Al-Nisaburi was not the first person to notice these stories. Jahiz before him did that, and others. But his book is the most comprehensive in the genre. He includes around 100 mad men and women. There's a chapter actually on mad women that is fascinating. You should read it. So yeah, basically this is it's a work of adab as well. It's a typical work of adab. So it consists of reports, of anecdotes, akhbar, riwayat about these madmen. Adab usually entertains, but also it teaches us something. And it's supposed to be a literary commentary or social commentary as well on the norms of these people, on their attitude towards things, or their likes, their dislikes, their ideals, their ambitions, their concerns about things. So it's a direct window into the society of 10th century Nishapur and the Muslim world in general.
I have a penultimate question for you, which is, can you tell us a little bit about your current project on Hamadani?
So Maqamat is a native genre of Arabic fictional literature. It was remarkably successful, right? You find Maqamat works in most of the Muslim world, most of the areas, so it traversed geographic boundaries, but also linguistic and religious boundaries. You find Maqamat in Hebrew, in Persian, Ottoman Turkish, in Hausa, in Syriac, etc. Now, what is remarkable about this genre is that we actually know the person who started the genre, who invented it. Badi' al-Zaman al-Hamadani, a famous adib, a famous literature from the eastern part of the Muslim world in the 4th Hijri century, 10th century. So he invented this genre not from nowhere, of course, right? In inventing it, he used all sorts of literary genres that were at his disposal at the time. But also he was in dialogue with Islamic disciplines such as philosophy, medicine, speculative theology, philosophy, etc. All sorts of things, Sufism as well. And he was in dialogue with these disciplines, but at the same time, he went beyond them to actually mock them. The language is very flowery. It's very high language, but the protagonist is a beggar.
Yes.
Right. So this tells us something about, he wants to say something from this. He's an anti-hero. He's someone who steals, who tricks people, who commits crimes, but in a very funny way. And this somehow makes you sympathize with him. You take his side because he needs to survive. Right. The darkly humorous tales that mocks even our understanding of ourselves, of the human nature, and he asks the big questions of literature. The question of existence, the question of death, how to survive, etc. Now, of course, the genres changed with time. Hariri's work is different, but also Suyuti's work is also different. The maqamat in the Mamluk and Ottoman period also changed. So our understanding of what a maqama is has also changed with time, up to the modern period, of course. But it's a major genre of Middle Eastern and global world literature. I am working currently with Maurice Pomerantz on a book that understands the transmission history of this text. How the text is changing, how maqamat are added, how are they lost, How are they modified and why this is the case? Why some maqamat warrant a commentary? The paratexts, right? The titles, how the title actually interprets also the maqama, the readership. Who reads this book and how did they read it? Why suddenly, for example, in Iran we found this number of manuscripts from in the same place, etc. So the book is about the transmission history of this book, but we're also doing an edition, a critical edition based on more than 40 manuscripts. It's actually fascinating work. And a translation that reads well in English, and that's believe it or not, that's very hard. How do you translate something like this? What kind of a register in English that you need to use in this? It's been a fascinating journey.
Wonderful. Well, we look very much forward to reading that and to reading some of your other upcoming works, about which I'm going to ask you my last question. It has to do with what kind of things are you up to other than the projects that you've already discussed with me. Maybe give us an insight into just some of the things you're up to and some of also the conferences that you're involved with organizing and the like.
Right. It's not an easy question actually to answer. But I just finished a conference in Beirut last semester on the art of anthology. It's an offshoot from my latest monograph, The Anthologist's Art. It's approaches to the Arabic literary anthologies, because anthologies are very useful texts to historians, but also they were rarely looked at as books in themselves that have their inner structure and inner logic. So the conference tries to approach the literary anthology from different angles. We're publishing the proceedings. I'm also organizing with you, actually, Mohammed, Rustom, and the Ridwan al-Sayyid from the Lebanese University and the American University of Beirut, a conference on mysticism and ethics in all centuries of Islam, including the modern period. So it will take place in Beirut in May. I am doing also a 2-volume handbook on Sufism as literature, one for prose and one for poetry, for Brill, the handbook on Sufism series, together with Alexander Knish. I just finished 2 books for Brill. One is Food as a Cultural Signifier. It was a proceeding of a conference that happened in Beirut. And another is a festschrift called Light Upon Light, Noor ala Noor, for Gerhard Bovering, one of my professors at Yale, together with Jamal Ilyas from University of Pennsylvania. So this is what I'm
some of the things that you're up to. It's you know, I wish you every success in all of your work, and thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation this morning.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you.